What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Scoundrels Inc. I am Frank Janish, and this week I'm riding solo. Just me. No Sean, no Brandon, no Kevin. It's just me. One of those times of the year where everything kind of coalesces and no one's really available, or we're sick. Brandon's sick, and Sean was unavailable, and Kevin's unavailable, and actually myself, I'm getting over kind of like some sort of head cold or congestion, whatever. But anyways, this week we're going to have a couple things we want to talk about and get into your questions that were submitted in our Discord. Don't want to forget about those. But would like to ask you if you could subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're trying to build this thing and grow an audience, a community here. And if you'd hit that subscribe button, it would really help us out. Follow us on our social medias on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Scoundrels Inc. Links are all in the description below, so all you gotta do is click it and then hit follow or subscribe, and that would help us out a lot here on the channel. But this week, I wanted to get into some of the things that I've been doing in my life regarding Star Wars, and then I'm going to get into some that, I don't know if you guys saw this on Twitter or where have you, but it's always been kind of a discussion between what would have happened if Padmé could get through to Anakin without Obi-Wan showing up. So that's something I kind of want to get my thoughts out there on. And then also I saw some interesting discourse surrounding the Holdo maneuver. Once again, The Last Jedi being a source of conversation, if you will. And then at the end of the show, we'll get into some of the Discord questions that we got. Again, if you want to join our Discord and see all the discussions that are going on over there in our Scoundrels community, if you will, links in the description for that. But to start off, lately, some of you may know that I've been streaming Jedi Survivor, and it has been a real for those who have been in the stream, it's been a real challenge for me. And I'm only playing on the Jedi Knight difficulty. I'm not like Sean, who's playing on Jedi Master, or Alex Damon, who's playing on Jedi Grandmaster. That's not me. I'm just Jedi Knight, and that's tough enough for me, as my streams can attest. But it's been a lot of fun, and we kind of gave our first thoughts on this game, Sean and I and Brandon and Kevin, last week in our episode, our first thoughts. And since then, I have finished the game. It was a lot of fun to get to that part of the game, the end part of the game with the boss fights and whatnot, and kind of seeing the story really unfold. And that's been it just made me really, I guess, bigger fans of the whole Mantis crew, whether it's Sierra, Grease, Cal, especially Marin, obviously BD1. It's been really, really fun to play that game and follow these characters again. I actually got halfway through Battle Scars, which is the book that precedes the game, and I do want to finish the book because there's some stuff in there that I've heard about that I haven't gotten to, that kind of explain one or two things that are in the game, or what have you. Maybe more, I'm not quite sure. But that's something I do want to finish. I started reading it when it came out, Battle Scars, and I kind of just blew through like the first 6 or 7 chapters, and I hit like a standstill for whatever the reason. I'm really bad at reading or finishing books. I can start them. I just can't. Sometimes I just don't finish them. But I am going to finish Battle Scars, and then I have Light of the Jedi waiting for me. I started that one as well. Like a handful of chapters into that one before then I got Battle Scars, and then so as you can see, my pattern is starting but not completing it right away, but eventually I will. So that's what's kind of been taking up a lot of my time these I guess 2 weeks now since the game came out, playing a lot of Jedi Survivor. It's been fun. Some other things I revisited. Actually, what happened, I have a few roommates that I live with, and they started watching Rebels, and they didn't start right from the beginning. They just started at the season 1 finale, which was a lot of fun to watch, and then we moved into the season 2 premiere, which obviously, if you've seen Rebels, Darth Vader shows up and all that, and Kanan and Ezra take on Darth Vader, and that's just like, whoa! Darth Vader is such a badass at this stage in the game, in the galaxy, the state of the galaxy. It was really fun to go revisit those episodes. I haven't watched Rebels since Andor was on. It was airing, because when Andor was airing, I was going through Rebels, and I thought it was really interesting to watch Andor and Rebels at the same time, because they're both dealing with the makings of Rebels cells. You have the Ghost crew as one cell off in the galaxy, and then you have, well, Cassian isn't part of a cell. You have Luthen and Mon Mothma building up a cell of rebellion, right? So, and you have Val and Cinta, right, and all, you have the Eldani crew that's working to put together a heist, and it's kind of like, what if that was like, I could totally see that as a mission that takes place in Rebels. The Rebels crew wants to, do a heist like what happened in Andor. But like, all that to say was, it's very cool to watch Rebels as like an animated version of Andor, or you could say it's like Andor is like an animated version of Rebels minus the Jedi, but a lot more adult. So I do kind of see similarities there, and also targeted for different audiences. So I think one of my thoughts has been, if you grew up watching Rebels, then going into Andor is kind of like a progression of you growing up. If you watch Rebels when you were 9, 10, 11, 12, and then here comes Andor, I don't know how many years later, I can't even do the math right now, but you're more of an adult at this point watching Andor, and you're taking some of the themes that they were dealing with in Rebels, but now on a much more adult and grander scale that they can do in live action. I think is a really cool, I think they are a really cool 1-2 punch, if you ask me. So the roommates started watching Rebels, and that's been really cool to watch them experience it, mostly for the first time, and ask questions and whatnot, and that's always been fun to answer. I did go back and watch a couple episodes of Clone Wars. I actually started in Season 1 in Clone Wars. I throw it on in the background, and I go, oh yeah, I remember this episode or that episode. And those have been cool, just to kind of refresh the brain and relive the Clone War era glory, if you will. A lot of fun with those characters. And I think, revisiting media that I've consumed, hundreds of times at this point in my life, never gets old for me. And especially if I haven't, especially for those that I haven't watched, hundreds of times, like the original trilogy or the prequels. And the sequel trilogy is creeping up there now, but that's going to take some time. I did go back and rewatch Solo, and I went back and rewatched Rogue One. I'm going to say Rogue Story. It's Rogue One. Actually, what I did though, one night I watched 3 Star Wars movies. I watched Empire Strikes Back, then I watched Solo, and then I watched Rogue One. And I gotta say, that's a pretty good trifecta of Star Wars movies. I know it's an original trilogy and 2 standalones, but watching Empire and then watching kind of a quote-unquote origin story of Han Solo is pretty cool. But then going into Rogue One, which kind of lays the groundwork and the foundation for what is obviously A New Hope, but then you jump to Empire Strikes Back in the midst of the rebellion at that point, which I think is really cool. So yeah, I've done that. Like all that I've just talked about has been within the past week and a half, 2 weeks. So it's been a lot of, it's always a lot of fun revisiting Star Wars and throwing it on the background, and then I'm working on my computer and whatnot. But that's some of the stuff that I've been watching, reading. Well, not really reading, wanting to read in Star Wars, the Star Wars universe. And I just saw that the release date for the From a Certain Point of View book for Return of the Jedi is coming out at the end of August. So that's really cool. I do have the first 2. And I haven't read any of those stories, but I've heard a lot of verbal retellings from a lot of my other friends and whatnot, and from across Twitter and everywhere else on the internet about some of these stories in there. So I'm looking forward to diving into those. I got a couple months to see how much I can get through before the Return of the Jedi, Certain Point of View book comes out. But like I said, with my history of starting books, don't know that I'll really finish them, but I don't think, from what I can tell, these are a bunch of different stories, so it's always cool to go back, and I think it'll be cool just to go and flip through pages and be like, oh, this one looks interesting, and go back and revisit some stories from a certain point of view. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what these books have in store. From what I heard, I'm excited about it, what I've been told, the kind of stories that are in them, and then obviously Return of the Jedi. That'll be great once that book comes out as well. So I'm going to move on to kind of the main topic of this episode, which is could Padmé have gotten through to Anakin if Obi-Wan didn't pop up when he did on Mustafar? Which is a really, really interesting question, because now we're trying to figure out how would these characters act without, how would they act if this one part of the equation was removed? And it's kind of, it's really interesting territory to get into, because now you're trying to get into the mind of George Lucas, which, people do from time to time. And it's interesting to think about, well, if Obi-Wan wasn't there, does Anakin force choke Padmé? Because we know that he does that in response to Obi-Wan popping up on the ship, and Anakin's like, you brought him here to kill me, to destroy me, and Padmé looks over and there's like, no, I know what's about to happen. I know that they're about to fight. One of them's going to die, and, but Anakin sees it as Padmé is now turned on her. Padmé brought Obi-Wan here to kill him. And you have to think about, well, how does Anakin even get to how does he jump to that conclusion? And it's because of all the manipulation from Palpatine, right? That's where it stems from. Palpatine has been manipulating Anakin for years, over a decade at this point, right? And it's sad. You can kind of poke fun at the whole Padmé dying from a broken heart, but it is heartbreaking to see someone consumed by what they perceive is good motivation. Anakin wants to save Padmé's life, but there's only one way he can attain that power, and that's through Palpatine. That's through the dark side. And it's such a misguided, way to go about it. And when Padmé is there trying to talk to him, let's run away, Anakin's like, we don't gotta run away. We have all this power. And it's interesting that, that Anakin doesn't want to just run off with Padmé. A, because he feels like he's got to stay with Palpatine to learn this power, to save her life, because he has seen a vision of her dying in childbirth. Now, I wish Kevin was here, because he's really big on the novelization of Revenge of the Sith. So if you're out there listening or watching, let me know in the comments if I'm way off or I remember correctly. But I do think, I don't know if this is true or not, or I can't remember if it's true or not, that in the novelization, that is it hinted at, or is this just another theory out there? You guys tell me, that Palpatine's kind of the one that sent this vision to Anakin that Padmé would die in childbirth, and then uses that to manipulate Anakin even further about, once he is confronted in the Chancellor's chambers, you can save Padmé from certain death, and when he reveals himself to Anakin, right? So it's all this manipulation that, when push comes to shove, Palpatine has done his quote-unquote homework, so that even those that are closest to Anakin, even those that Anakin loves the most, Palpatine has put a wedge in there that not even those people could turn or save Anakin. And so when people talk about, well, if Obi-Wan wasn't there, then Padmé doesn't die. Anakin doesn't choke her, doesn't force choke her. And that might be true. That I could see that being something, but I fear that something else, well, I don't know if it's worse, but even a fate even as dark or darker, depending on how you want to look at it, I feel like at that point, Anakin probably wouldn't kill her, but more or less she would become a prisoner in a sense of his, in terms of, okay, Padme, you don't understand what I'm doing here for you. So you're gonna come with me. We're gonna go back on Coruscant, whatever. You're gonna live here. I'm gonna learn this power from the Chancellor, and then I'm gonna save your life. You're gonna see. Watch, when you go in childbirth, you're not going to die, and then you'll be thankful for me. It's almost as like I feel like Anakin would want to be like, you don't get it. He would be upset. He'd be very upset, and maybe somewhere in his anger, he might kill Padme between then and like his children being born. Maybe that happens, but I feel like if Padme didn't die there on that platform on Mustafar, that Padme would almost become a prisoner to Anakin, and in that sense, a prisoner of Palpatine, because Palpatine could have spun everything which way and could have, said, if you don't do this, Padme, blah blah blah, all these people come for you, this, that, and the other, everything's in disarray. Renounce your senatorship from Naboo. I'll make sure you live, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it could have turned into a whole list of things not good for Padme. Now, when the children are born, that could be a different story. It depends on how much of a threat Palpatine really views those children. And then that's like, does he, terminate her pregnancy through the Force? I mean, that's some really dark stuff. I don't know. It could get really bad from if we're just talking about Padme not dying on the platform that day. But because Obi-Wan shows up, Anakin's like, you brought him here to kill me, starts force choking her. Obi-Wan more or less, quote unquote, convinces Anakin to let her go, and she's unconscious, right? It's very, very interesting, I guess, thought exercise, if you will. What would happen? What would have happened? It's not like Padme would have been like, you know what, Anakin, you're right. This is swell. She's not going to do that. She's already seen the fall of democracy, right, with thunderous applause. So there's nothing that Anakin or Padme is going to be like, you know what, Anakin, you're right. Even if she was in childbirth and things were going south, and then Anakin was like, no, I can stop you from dying, I don't even think that would have made Padme a believer of Anakin and what he was doing, right? Because the democracy, the republic in which Padme was trying to, the values in which she was trying to uphold and instill within Naboo and the galaxy at large, that's all crumbled. And at what cost? Why? So you could save my life? I think Padme is the type of person, in my estimation, that she would give up her life for the Republic, for the democracy, for those values. I think that's the type of character and person that she is. So this is all such a really winding type of monologue about this whole kind of situation. It just spurs different type of topics of conversation. It just what happens of this or that and the other. So I think the other aspect of this conversation that came up that I also saw on Twitter was, what if Ahsoka was there? And then it's the whole conversation of, well, could Ahsoka defeat Anakin? Would Anakin kill Ahsoka? I'm like, yeah, Anakin could kill Ahsoka. I believe that. But I also think, let's say, if you replace Obi-Wan with Ahsoka, Anakin is not getting 3 of his limbs chopped off at the end of the day. I don't think Ahsoka is skilled enough at that point in time to do that to someone like Anakin, or have, I guess, the the capability to get to that point where Obi-Wan did. I don't think Ahsoka, as much as I love Ahsoka, at this point in her life, she's been away from the Jedi Order for how long now at this point. You know, I don't know when's the last time she wielded a lightsaber. Aside, was she gonna go defeat or capture Maul? Right. So she she held her own against Maul, got the best of him, and then goes to take on Anakin and tries to turn him back to the light. I don't know. That's like pretty exhausting, And then, not to mention, mentally, it's an exhausting fight for Ahsoka, and physically. She's a great swordsman, but compared to Darkside Anakin, I think she could hold her own for a little bit, and I think she would be smart enough to know when to bow out, when she couldn't reach him, when she couldn't defeat him. I think she's smart enough to bow out. So I would like to believe that Anakin would have definitely tried to have killed her. I think she could be good enough just to barely get away. And then it's the Obi-Wan Anakin or Obi-Wan Ahsoka is the bane of Anakin's existence. And those are the figures that Palpatine would further instill in Anakin, that these people, they are traitors. They have betrayed you. They're part of the Jedi Order. It's really, really sad when you see someone manipulated like that. And we're talking about a story here. And sometimes you can see that in real life, and that's tremendously sad. But to be demonstrated in a Star Wars story with a main character like Anakin, it's, as I've gotten older, it's just really sucks to watch, because you're just like, oh, if only this had happened. Oh, if only this had happened. But the point of the story that I think, there's a reason why this had to happen. It's because, yes, George wrote it this way, and because he wanted to kind of give this lesson, let this be a lesson about the dark side, about greed, about power, what it can do, corruption. As much as we love Anakin, he has to be, I think, someone that we follow, that we care about, and then see these horrible things that has happened to him. Some of it by his choice, some of it beyond his control. Larger things are happening around him that he's not aware of. But it sucks, because Anakin is definitely one of my favorite characters. But then he becomes Darth Vader, and it's like, the other conversation is, well, where do you draw the line between Anakin and Darth Vader? And people will say, oh, well, when he pledges himself to Palpatine's teachings, that's when he becomes Darth Vader. And I go, yeah, sure. If you want to draw a line, like, yeah, this is when Anakin dies, and this is when Darth Vader is born. You could, sure, make it like that. But at the end of the day, I still go back to the notion that Anakin, the good guy, Anakin, he made a decision to go down a certain path, fully knowing that the dark side can forever dominate your destiny. It's so seductive. It's quick and easy, right? He made the decision to go down that path. The good guy that we know, he made that decision. Ultimately, and again, there's some outside influences that are pushing him to that path, for sure. But it's the fact that he has a decision, and that he makes that decision, is, I think, part of the tragedy for me of Anakin deciding to go down this path, even though it's for the best intentions, to save someone you love. But, it's, what is that one? Is it a Yoda quote? I think it's in Clone Wars or in Rebels. I think I saw a video someone was quoting it just recently, and it fits. You know, it turns about like how you fight. I think where was it, in Andor, I forget, but you know, yeah, you won the battle, but at what cost? Are you fighting like the Empire? Well, that makes you no better than them, right? If you're going down a dark path for the greater good, you know, does that make you any better than, you know, these nefarious people that are doing it to gain power, and you just happen to learn this other power that can save a life, but at what cost? It's at the cost of the entire galaxy and their freedom. Like, is that worth it? No, I like no one person is. I don't think, and we're getting into really tricky territory here, but no one person should be worth the lives of trillions of, you know, beings, you know, quadrillions, whatever, how many people are in the universe, whatever, galaxy, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, so, yeah, there's a lot of ways you can have this discussion and this thought exercise about what would have happened. But, you know, ultimately, Anakin was to fall to the dark side. If you believe in, or not even believe in, but if you adhere to the lessons that are within the Star Wars story of Anakin, like this prophecy, he's supposed to fall to the dark side and then bring balance to the Force. And I know people have their other thoughts about that because of Rise of Skywalker and what have you. Okay, fine. But Anakin was supposed to fall, be redeemed, you know, and I think sometimes when people talk about, can so-and-so be redeemed for doing what they did, I think sometimes people tend to look at it with a real-world lens of, if this person murdered a bunch of kids, and they do, you know, years of community service and charity work and this, that, and the other, and just talks and as an advocate for what have you, you know, are they redeemed? I mean, you know, that's a tough. It's like, I don't know. I feel kind of icky about it because you killed, you know, needlessly, and it's the same thing with if you apply that logic to Anakin, because people will come back at you, you know, with, well, he's responsible for the deaths of trillions and trillions and trillions of people. And it's like, well, I think you can look at it that way, but this idea of redemption doesn't necessarily, you know, always have to involve the darkest deeds known to man. It's just, I think, a way to, I guess, exhibit, you know, what does redemption mean for individuals? Whether if I've made a bad choice and I hurt someone in my life and I go about trying to correct those wrongs, there's a redemption in that. If someone sees, like, I need help to fix or help me course correct in my life, you know, to help redeem myself, you know, are people worthy of redemption? Are people worthy of, that have strayed away, are they worthy of being helped and brought back and redeemed, you know, onto this path of, you know, a good path in life, you know? I think so, but it's easy to give up on people who have gone down a dark path, even a path you can't even understand how they got there. I think it's easy to give up. It's easy to throw up your hands, and maybe you have done everything you could do, you know. But as Padmé says to Obi-Wan, you know, there's still good in him. You know, it's like she still believes that there is that good person inside him. And I do think, you know, that speaks to the larger view of there's good in everyone. Like, even some of the most sinister people that have ever existed, there is something good inside of them. We just have to believe that it's there, and help them find the good. But it's like I said, it's very easy to not go down that route, just as it's very easy to go down as that individual go down that dark path. So I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of rambling at this point, but like I said, these types of conversations really, at least for me, I just start going off in 80 different directions. I don't really know how to control my line of thinking when it comes to some of that. Okay, also, kind of just one more topic that I saw, and I'll be really brief on that, and I'll get to the Discord questions. I saw some discourse on the Holdo maneuver, and it isn't the first time I've seen it on Twitter, obviously, but it's kind of had a resurgence as of this past week. And I saw some tweets out there about, like, well, here's why logically it makes sense in the Star Wars universe, that and the other, and there's other people who are like, this is the dumbest thing ever, we've never seen this before, and here's why, this, that, and the other, how come we haven't seen it in other movies, blah, blah, blah. And at the end of the day, here's the deal. The Holdo maneuver in The Last Jedi was awesome as hell. I know it, you know it, everyone knows it. Everyone who watched that movie for the first time and watched the Holdo maneuver happen, you were speechless. Admit it. You were speechless. You weren't even mad. You were just like, holy hell. That was incredible. I've never seen that before. That was amazing. And yeah, maybe you have had the thought, like I did. I go, well, why didn't anyone think of that earlier? Man, that's weird. Yeah, they could have done that. Why didn't they do that to the Death Star? Why didn't they just send a ship in hyperspace through the first Death Star? Well, it's just like, look, sometimes I think our escapism gets the better of us, and we so desperately want to live in these worlds and apply a reality to them from our own world so that somehow we can feel like we can inhabit them. But then when we do that and we try to do that and if things don't add up or people disagree with you and you get angry and it's just like, whoa, 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 whoa. We're talking about a space opera fantasy here. It doesn't have to be any more complicated than for the story that they were telling in The Last Jedi. Holdo made a sacrifice for the Resistance, and it happened to be one of the coolest things you've ever seen in Star Wars. And then I think it's okay to just leave it at that and forget about asking the question, how come no one else ever did that? I don't know that's the right question to be asking when you see that sequence. If that's the first question you ask after seeing that sequence, I don't know that you're really fully taking in what the story is trying to tell you and convey to you. And maybe, you could have a critique about, well, there's a different way to do that. And maybe that's true. But Rian Johnson decided, I want to use this sequence to further along, the sacrifice and what it means to, whatever you want to take away from it, right? Instead of applying military tactic thought to it and be like, well, how come they couldn't just, use another Calamari cruiser and do that or whatever? Why couldn't they use another frigate or what? Instead, why don't you just maybe you could just focus on the story and not worry about the military logistics of why that is or isn't possible in Star Wars, a place that's made up, But at the same time, I will say there's absolutely room for discussion about, how does that fit into Star Wars lore? I certainly think there's absolutely room for discussion like that, and those are fun, deep, nerdy, sweaty conversations to have with your friends. But if you're getting so bent out of shape about, why this is the dumbest thing that could ever happen, like the Force, like you're cool with the Force, this mystical energy field. but hyperspace like missile launcher cruiser thing, you're not the Holdo maneuver. You're not. That's a bridge too far for you. Oh, by the way, hyperspace actually doesn't even exist. Like theoretically, right? But like it doesn't actually exist. There's a whole slew of things that you understand is the fantasy, but when it comes to this thing, the Holdo maneuver, it's like, no, that can't happen. That shouldn't. I don't think they thought that through. I don't think this person knows Star Wars. Like, when I saw that sequence, I was like, holy hell, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And yeah, dang, how come no one else has ever done that? I'm like, maybe, but at the same time, I may have that thought, but then at the end of the day, I'm like, you know what? Who cares? It was pretty cool. What else do you want to show me? So, all right, whatever. That's, let me know what you think about the Holdo maneuver. Is it cool? Is it not cool? Is it, what are your thoughts? I'd love to know, actually. Okay, let's get into some of the Discord questions that y'all submitted here. We have a few this week. Not too many, but a few, and that's cool. We'll start off with Darth Kid. She asks, of the books / movies that influenced George Lucas to create his galaxy far, far away, 1, have y'all checked out any of them? I'll bet Dune is a given with you scoundrels. And 2, what did you think? And 3, was your enjoyment in rewatching the original trilogy either enhanced or diminished in any way? Well, Darth Kitty, as the only one here this week, I can't speak for the others, although I would venture guess that Sean is more of the reader of the group, so he might have more insight into that. I know of the Joseph Campbell inspirations or influence and what have you in other mythology for George, but I can't speak to how that's influenced my enjoyment of the original trilogy, just because I haven't, obviously I'm not that big of a reader. So, but what I will say is I've seen, frequently on YouTube now and YouTube Shorts and what have you, Instagram Reels, TikToks, older talks that George has given and whatnot, and kind of like his philosophy on life and living and things like that, good and evil, good and bad, light and the dark. There's clips out there, a minute and a half clips out there of George Lucas talking about his philosophy on things and how it's, and I watch those and I go, wow, that's, I listen to how he speaks. He's not even talking about Star Wars per se in these clips, but he's just talking about, good and bad, like very simple things, and then when you apply what he's talking about, when I apply what he's talking about in certain clips or whatnot, and apply it to Star Wars, I go, oh wow, this is obviously the same guy, but I guess I have a more of an insight into how he thinks more, and like it kind of then informs me a little bit more on what he's trying to do with his own stories, and so I do like watching those clips. If you've come across those. Next question we get is from Erdan5, and he says, a Star Wars canon sourcebook says that Obi-Wan Kenobi cremated Maul after killing him on a funeral pyre. Where did Kenobi get all the wood in the middle of Tatooine? By the way, where did he get the wood for the campfire for Ezra prior to his duel with Maul? Well, I don't know where you can find wood in a desert. Maybe there is some sort of small forest area or wooded or trees, whatever, on Tatooine. My idea here is perhaps he asked some Jawas, hey, could you get me some wood? I'd like to make a fire every once in a while. And then the Jawas, I feel like they have a whole thrift store type of network throughout the galaxy. They got different franchises on each planet, on different planets, right? And maybe it cost Obi-Wan a few, maybe it's expensive for Obi-Wan, or maybe he just, waved the hand across and said, hey, you will get me wood from Andor, whatever, I don't know. So my only answer would be that he asked Jawas to get it for him. They got it for him. That's how he got the wood. That's how I can. That's all I got. We have 2 or 3 more questions here. This one from E-Hit Inama. He writes, with Tony Gilroy officially stepping back from all duties, writing and otherwise, on Andor for the writer's strike, do you think Disney powering through with their productions rather than putting them on hold is concerning? Interesting question. If you've been following the news, the WGA is on a strike, the writer's strike, which means no more writing, movies, television, like stop, no writing, right? And so obviously, as we know, Tony Gilroy has the writer for Andor, and he's a producer on Andor. And yes, they are going to still, I guess, continue on with production in Andor. They still have a few more months of shooting. They've been shooting, and they still have a few more months left to shoot. I think they're supposed to wrap in August. The concerning part is that when they're on set and they need to do rewrites, Tony can't do that. Tony Gilroy can't do that. No writer can do that unless you break the rules with the WGA, which would be pretty dumb on their part. Not gonna lie, because you need solidarity at a time like this with this strike. So no rewrites are going to happen, which means then someone has to ad-lib it, or the actors do, or whoever, I don't know. Which, I think it's pretty obvious that, well, none of those people are of a caliber of Tony Gilroy, right? So it's concerning that if there needs to be some sort of rewrites or revisions or what have you, dialogue or scenes, are doing different things now, or they don't quite know how to adjust it for whatever reason, and they don't have Tony Gilroy around. That's concerning for sure, because when you look at season 1, it just seems like they had a plan. From all the interviews I've listened to and read, they had a plan, a structure, they executed it, and you saw it on the screen, and it was phenomenal. So although I would like to think that with Diego Luna, he's also obviously an executive producer on this series, I would like to think that he knows the story, the characters well enough that if there needs to be something like that done on set, that he might be someone to go to, maybe not the only person, but someone to go to. So I don't know, it still is concerning just because it just doesn't have Tony Gilroy's hands on it. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how far they feel like they can get with production, which is interesting to think about Mandalorian season 4, because we know that Jon Favreau wrote all of season 4 already, and I think it's quite obvious why he did that, because of this looming strike, or current strike now. But I don't know, I hope that these live action shows, because even like The Acolyte as well, which is shooting, I hope they're not, those visions of those showrunners like Tony Gilroy and Leslie Headland are not affected in negative ways, because I want to see their visions, their true, full visions on screen. And if Disney, Lucasfilm feels like they can go through production without having to do any rewrites, or if they feel like, so-and-so we can get by, I don't know. It's hard to say without seeing the final product, obviously, if this decision will have a negative effect on these shows. And also, from my understanding, the rules over in the UK are a little bit different for writers, I think, or producers over there as well, because they just have different rules in the UK. So I don't know. And maybe I don't know. So maybe it's not as affected, that production, as or U.S. based productions. I don't know, North American productions are. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Maddie Gunner from Holy Snokums If You Got'ems. Which Star Wars quote do you use in everyday life? Well, it's hard not to say hello there. You know, I mean, it's 2 words, like hello there. You know, it's an easy one. I think every time I do laundry, spinning, that's a good trick. You know, I kind of say that to myself. Boy, you know, if I get mad or upset or something's like, what, just didn't go my way, you know, I'd be like, I pull the ears off a gun dark. You know, it's just a little, I mean, there's tons of quotes that I use in my everyday life. It's not just like one quote, because there's so many that fit so many different aspects throughout the day. You know, this is where the fun begins. If I'm going to work and I really don't want to go to work and I'm sarcastic about it, or if I'm not being sarcastic about it and I say, I have a bad feeling about this, because I probably have a bad feeling about this, or that day, whatever. But yeah, I definitely use Star Wars quotes all the time, in jest, or even if someone, you know, who is not even a Star Wars fan says a sentence and like ends on a word that like connects to a quote, I will actually. It happened last week on the show. Brandon was talking about when he was getting hired, and he said it just happened all very fast. The fact that he said very fast, myself and Sean, by the way, if you go back and listen, it's myself and Sean. We both say very fast, very dangerous. They have pod racing on Malice there. That's where, you know, that quote. So when people have said just even 2 words, very fast, if I hear very fast, I'm immediately following up going very fast, very dangerous. No matter what. It's like instinctual. It's crazy. But I love it. Okay, last question of the day, and that's from, well, what do you know, PLD. He's from Snoke on the Water, a Star Wars podcast with Maddie Gunner. PLD asks, in the new Jedi Order film, where do you think the government is? Hosnian Prime and the First Order are gone. Who's in charge? Is there a unified government? Ooh, interesting question. I really don't know. Now, in the new Jedi Order film, if it's in fact titled New Jedi Order or some variation of that, I don't know that we're going to get a whole lot of government story in like kind of like the way we did in the prequels. I don't know if they'll delve that much into it like that, but I think it would be interesting, because like if you look at it, for like 50, 60 years, less than 100 years, the galaxy has been in turmoil. There's been such an upheaval of government, right? There's the Republic, then the Empire, and then there's the New Republic, which we're getting stories on now, and that seems a very, loosey-goosey, especially when you get into the sequel trilogy. They're gone as soon as we see them in The Force Awakens, right? So there's been like 3 different governments, even though the Republic lasted for, I don't know how many years, right? For 1,000 years or something like that. I could be wrong with that, whatever. It lasted for a long time. Then the Empire lasted for, like 30 years or something? I don't know. And then the New Republic lasted for, like, almost the same kind of duration, if you will, in some form or fashion. And so there's been all these different, there's been 3 different types of government within, like, a 100-year span. It would be interesting if, like, the galaxy was like, yeah, we need government. Or if the galaxy was like, I don't know that a structured government is a good idea, because look at the past 3. One that stood for like a long time fell, and it fell hard, and we were under the Empire's thumb for decades. And then when they were ousted, we thought that was going to solve all our problems, but then the New Republic came along, and we still had problems. They were just different ones, and it didn't make life for everybody that great as well. There was such, because I think the New Republic has some lawlessness about it that the Empire just didn't. There was oppression, but there wasn't lawlessness in the sense that, in the way that I think the New Republic has. Because, you look at Mandalorian, they're talking about the pirates, taking over Navarro, and they're not just doing that on Navarro, they're doing that in other systems, right? So I would like to think that the galaxy at large is very trepidatious and weary of installing a new government. But no doubt there's going to be, I think, a contingent of people that think installing a government is a good way to go for the greater good of the galaxy as a whole. And then I think you would also have people who, within that government and outside the government, are going to look at the Jedi Order that Rey's trying to do and have a weary eye on that because, well, the last time the Jedi were around, they were used for a galactic war, and then they were all hunted down and killed because they were seen as traitors. Now, whether or not, at this point in time, when this movie takes place, people understand that it was all the machinations of a Sith Lord, Darth Sidious, and the Jedi weren't really traitors. But also at the same time, yeah, they weren't traitors, but they were kind of losing their way because, well, they also didn't see this bad guy coming along and taking over the galaxy. So it's like, all right, we don't need a Jedi Order, but I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see what type of politics, whether it's government politics, Jedi politics, that they get into in this new Jedi Order film. So, yeah, great questions. Hope you didn't mind my voice for the duration of this episode, however long it's going to be. But I want to thank everyone for tuning in this week, and I hope to have everyone back next week, even Kevin, I think. We'll probably do what we did last week, where we kind of Skype him into our live quote-unquote studio and whatnot. That was a lot of fun, so I hope to do those more in the future. But until then, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment on on my ramblings today. Tell me how I'm way off, or tell me how I'm spot on, or tell me you're like, you got some of it right, you got some of it wrong. I don't know. We'll talk about it, right? I do want to read those. I do want to respond to your comments and interact, because that's honestly one of my favorite parts about doing something like this is putting my words out there and seeing how people respond to them, and having a conversation and a dialogue in a friendly manner, in a cordial manner, obviously. So don't be, don't be a dick, okay? Just don't.
Scoundrel. I like the sound of that.